In this video, we're gonna go over why you may be feeling too much of your biceps or your triceps in a pull down and how to fix that solution, not only in the example that we're going to go over, but across all rowing and pulling exercises for good. So a lot of the time, first of all, people tend to feel too much arms, biceps, triceps, other elbow flexors, etc. when they're using fixed handles, right? So a fixed lat pull down bar or a fixed handle that even might be neutral grip, whether it's narrow or whether it's wider. And that's really just a product of the constraint of a fixed grip. So even if you are using a free motion handle, this problem can still happen, but it's more likely to happen and you're more likely to feel other things that are not the pulling muscles exclusively if you're using a fixed handle. So just thought I would give that caveat. Now, I'm going to use the example of a single arm pull down to kind of demonstrate the force stuff here, but just keep in mind that this applies to all pulling exercises, right? Whether it's a row, whether it's a pull down or something in between. So the principles discussed here are going to be applicable across, again, all scenarios pulling, as well as all scenarios pushing, if you wanted to kind of extrapolate it to that in a little bit of a different way, but maybe that's for another video. So a pull down wherein most people probably don't feel much elbow flexor or elbow extensor is something like this, right? Where basically the forearm stays in line parallel with the direction of the cable the entire time. People tend to feel too much bicep when they pull so that their hand comes basically in line with their shoulder, and so that the cable is now no longer parallel to the forearm. So if you could imagine this, right? This is the cable in this instance, right? If I'm pulling up here, I'm basically doing a curling motion where the line of resistance is really far from my elbow and it's really basically going straight through my shoulder. So if you or your clients are pulling and aiming sort of too high, right? They're aiming toward their shoulder and their intent isn't really to drive the arm down toward the hip in this case. What will end up happening is their hand and their elbow flexors will take them there in a sort of curling motion. Okay, so how do you solve for that? Well, you basically just get the cable to stay parallel to the forearm the entire time. A lot of times what happens when you make that correction with people, though, is they go from feeling too much bicep now to feeling too much tricep, because a lot of the times when people coach their clients or just themselves that way, they try to coach them out of it by squeezing their lat, right? Squeezing their lat may do something good in from the perspective of getting rid of some of the biceps, elbow flexor stuff, but it introduces another variable, which is that you're not really actually paying attention to the physics of the exercise. And if you really pay attention to just squeezing down, a lot of times what happens is that shoulder girdle goes down, the arm keeps going back, and the shoulder kind of comes forward, so that now again I have the same problem just from the other side of the joint, meaning that, like, picture if I'm in this position, right? I'm basically doing a triceps push down, okay? So when I'm in that position and I pull down and my shoulder kind of comes forward this way, whether it just be from trying to pull too far back instead of down or trying to squeeze the lat, again, too much in that sort of mind-muscle connection-y type way, that angle of that, the forearm being at an angle that's now more this way, right? Instead of that earlier example where we were pulling kind of too much toward our shoulders, so we had a lot of biceps. It's almost the opposite of that. You can think of it that way, to now where I'm basically just doing a triceps extension to some degree. So people will get to the bottom and then this kind of thing will happen, and that will effectively just necessitate some degree of triceps recruitment again if you're going to be there. So this really just comes down to the physics in terms of the solution of keeping this forearm in line with this cable the entire time. So if I'm doing a pull down this way, if I'm doing a pull down that's more vertical, right, relative to that, or if I'm doing something like a row, right, where I'm, you know, this looks somewhat ridiculous, but I'm kind of angled here, you can see that my forearm is in line with that cable throughout the entire time. And if you do this just right, and if you do it for enough repetitions over enough, you know, a long enough period of time, you're not really going to have to focus on it anymore. Your brain is just going to understand, like, okay, I'm going to keep my forearm in line with that cable, or that, you know, whatever it happens to be, dumbbell, barbell, what have you, so that my pulling muscles can just do their pulling thing. Okay, so above all else, forearm angle relative to the cable. If there's not a straight line basically going through both of those at the same time, it's highly likely you're going to feel a good amount of bicep, other elbow flexor, and a good amount of tricep. So hopefully that was helpful, and hopefully that elucidated some things that may have been confusing to you. And if you have any questions or anything like that, definitely leave them in the comment section and I'll try to get to them.